it just made me realize it was a choice. Like, I want to be with you. I'm not just with you because it's easy or because of the kids or, you know, it's just what I'm used to. It made me realize that it was a choice and not a default.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy approach to non-monogamy. However, it's important to remember that everyone does it a little bit differently, and the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please be aware that we aren't doctors or therapists. Consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Well, welcome to episode 230. That's exciting.
Is it? What's so exciting about it?
I don't know, because we're just like getting more and more episodes, and it's exciting.
Just 70 away from 300?
Yeah, I don't know. There's no really, it's just exciting.
270 away from 1,000? We're sneaking up on it. We need to start preparing for the 1,000th episode.
Wait, 270 away from 1,000.
770.
Oh, there you go.
What did I say?
270?
That's from 500.
I was right. I was just a little confused.
Well,
anyway.
we'll have a pre-party at 500
right.
for the 1,000th episode extravaganza.
Right.
So,
yeah. We got a little while for that.
Yeah,
but we're working our way there.
Mark your calendars for 2025.
I think it's more than that.
2028.
Anyway, we're Finn and Emma, and welcome to the show. Today we have a conversation and interview with CJ, and she has been with her husband for about 18 years, and by the time she was 30, she realized that she's done everything that she really set out to do. She had a job like she loved, and she already had kids and their marriage that she wanted. But she realized something was missing. So her and her husband have been working on opening their relationship over the past 3 years.
Yeah, it was interesting hearing her talk about, she sort of described a midlife crisis before she really even hit 30. And so what her and her husband did with that is pretty amazing. And it's a beautiful story. And so we're grateful that she came on to share. And thank you to her husband for supporting that. And also check out CJ's book, came out not that long ago, called Into the Open, which is sort of a fictional representation of, I wouldn't say exactly their marriage, but she does drop some spoilers in this. Like things that have actually happened in real life show up in the book in various ways. And so, yeah, we're really excited about it, and we're grateful to her for doing that work, and again, for coming on the show. So check out the book. There are links in the show notes at normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Just click on the podcast tab, and you'll see links there.
Yes. Before we jump into the interview, we do have a couple of quick announcements. First up, a huge thank you to our incredible Patreon community. We're so grateful for all of you. If you're out there looking for community, we have a community of over 200 people now. It's amazing. We have an ongoing MeWe chat. We have monthly Q&As. Actually, the next Q&A our April Q&A was last night, but we'll have another one in May.
Tough luck. You don't get to...
I know, but we'll have another one in May. We also have men's and women's groups. So if you're looking for like-minded people, come check it out. Go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com.
You got this. You got it.
normalizingnonmonogamy.com and click on the Patreon button.
And another huge thank you to everybody who came out in person and met us and met each other over the last few weeks. We've done a handful of events in Northern California and Southern California. We did pole dancing. We did a meet and greet. We did a improv in the park.
Yes.
We did another meet and greet in San Diego. So we've done a whole bunch of stuff, and we've probably met about 80 to 100 different people.
Yes.
And it's been amazing. So thank you to anybody who's out there, who joined us, who came out, who just supported the work we're doing. So it was wonderful, wonderful to meet all of you. And likewise, the people we met back in New Orleans earlier this spring, winter, I don't know, depends on where you're at. February. And so, yeah, just a huge thank you to everybody who's come out to the events. And if you're bummed that you missed us and you want to maybe take another stab at meeting us, we have one more event tomorrow, Thursday, April 7th in Los Angeles. It is an event actually hosted by Sex Positive LA called movie night and poly hang. We're going to watch or screen a couple of different, a new documentary that is on Netflix about pleasure. And then there's going to be sort of conversations in between. So Emma and I will be there. Again, this is a Sex Positive LA event, but we're going to be there. We're going to have swag and we're going to be hanging out with everybody there. So if you get a chance, come out and check it out. There are links on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Click on the community events tab, and then under in-person events, you'll see links directly there to sign up through Sex Positive LA's Eventbrite.
Yes. And then after that, our next in-person event is going to be in New Orleans in September. So we will have the weekend of September 17th. Mark your calendars. It'll be a whole weekend of really fun activities. So more information will be coming out very soon about that.
But if you want to go sign up now for the pool party and the high ropes course, you can do that on the community events tab as well, right next to where you just signed up for Sex Positive LA.
Exactly. We also have some fun virtual events coming up. On April 22nd, we have a virtual trivia night, and on April 23rd, we have a virtual meet and greet. So no matter where you're at, you can join those. These events are open to anyone who is open-minded and respectful. We'd love to have you join us. Again, as Finn said, go to the community events tab on our website and you can find out more.
Yeah. And with that, we're going to jump into the interview. But first, head over to our website, click on the Contact Us tab, send us a voicemail, send us an email. We love to get them. We respond to them all. And we would love to hear from you. Maybe you're interested in coming on the show. Maybe you just want to give us some feedback, or who knows? Who knows what you got for us? So we would love to hear from you. And we would love to meet you tomorrow at the event with Sex Positive LA. Until then, we'll see you on the other side.
Let's go.
Let's go talk to CJ.
Let's go. Welcome, CJ, to the show. We're excited to talk to you today and hear your stories. Thanks for being here.
And for putting up with our nonsense.
There hasn't been that much nonsense.
It's a little bit of nonsense this morning. We're excited to talk, so thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Do you mind starting just by introducing yourself?
Okay, so I'm CJ. I'm in England. I'm in my mid-30s. I'm married and I've got 2 kids. And we've been kind of exploring non-monogamy very, very slowly over the last few years. The pandemic's kind of helped with the slowness, which my husband's been pretty glad about, but it's been quite frustrating for me.
Yeah. Did you start opening, like having those conversations about opening up, like at the beginning of the pandemic, or was there some lead up?
No, there was quite a lot of lead up. So we'd had kind of a couple of sort of dates and things right before the pandemic. So it was kind of timed pretty terribly from my point of view, but actually did serve us well in the end, because it did just force us to slow down, which I'm not always the best at. I'm quite impatient.
Yeah.
Right. And what did that lead up what did that lead up look like, and how? Well,
1 second, I'm going to interrupt you.
Perfect.
I'm going to back you up for a little bit. How long have you two been together, and when was non-monogamy introduced in your relationship?
Hold on. That's what I was trying to ask with my question.
Okay.
So we've been together. I was 18 when we met. So it's my first kind of proper relationship. I'm 36 now, so that's half my life. And then it probably was introduced. So we had kids quite young. We did all the whole relationship escalator thing. I kind of got to, before I was 30, I kind of had my life set. So I had kids, I was married, had a house, had a job that I loved, had friends that we loved the town that we live in. And it was kind of like, what am I going to do with my 30s? Like I've done everything. Like all my friends are kind of getting to that place now and doing all that stuff, but I've done it already. So I think it kind of started around then, a bit of a midlife crisis, when other people were having their Bridget Jones kind of body clock is ticking, when you're going to have a baby. I was like, I've done all those things. So that's kind of when I guess I started having my little panic and wanting a little bit more for myself.
Yeah. And were you the one that brought it up?
Yes.
Brought up non-monogamy?
Yeah, 100%.
And what was, I guess, your introduction to it? Did you just get curious and start researching?
I think I just always kind of had crushes on people and just thought that wasn't okay. But I think from the start, I always was kind of like, you can do what you like with anyone. It doesn't bother me as long as we're still together, and I don't even need to know about it. Just tell me kind of if you're going to leave me or whatever. But he was very much, cheating is absolutely unacceptable. So I'd have these crushes, but I kind of thought I couldn't do anything about them. And then the more you're watching all these love triangles on TV and all of that, and I'm like, if they just spoke to each other, I'm sure this could work out. Like, why can't they just all get together and like all get on? So it just always made a lot of sense to me. And I'm a big reader. So then I just started reading like every book I could get my hands on about it. And I think I'm writing a book now, and I would always be trying to get my husband to read all these books that I'd read and loved, or at least just giving him little passages to read. And he basically wasn't interested. And reading a non-fiction book about a topic that you're not really interested in is quite boring. I just couldn't get him on board. So I decided to take a different slant on it and go for fiction and kind of tell a story that was easier to read, that maybe would be a bit more attractive to somebody that wasn't that interested in learning about it, but that was maybe a bit more entertaining rather than educational. So I was like all over all the books, every film, every TV show, and there's so many more of them about now, right? Like it's not that hard to find examples of non-monogamy, but they're just not always the healthiest.
I was going to say, finding examples are abundant. Healthy ones, or maybe accurate depictions are fewer and far between. But for sure. And so so for the 12 years, let's say roughly 12 years of like, you got together and then you sort of had the like moment of like, oh, maybe I want to be a little more serious about that. But in that 12-year gap, it sounds like he was pretty serious about monogamy. And how do you start to broach that subject with him while sort of knowing that piece of him?
So I think it kind of happened. So we both had a couple of sort of drunken snogs on stag do's and hen nights and things like that. And he was just okay with that. And it kind of just opened the door to me that maybe all this time he's been like, absolutely no to any cheating is wrong. It just opened the door that I kissed someone and I told him about it and I was kind of nervous, but then he was just like, oh yeah, that's fine. And then it was that was like away on a hen night, just a random. And then it happened with somebody local, and again, it was fine. But then I said, I'd like to do it again. And that kind of put a bit of a change in the direction, and he had to kind of take it a bit more seriously. And so we were talking for a long time about, would it be okay for me to see this person again? And then we were on another night out and ended up, this guy and a bunch of other friends all came back to our house. My husband was the one to invite them all back. And then we kind of hung out for a bit, and then he goes off to bed. And I took that as permission that it was all okay. So I did it again. And then, it was not okay.
And when you say did it again, you say like
just
kiss
a kiss.
Else.
Yeah, just a kiss. But it was not okay. But it was kind of pushing that boundary was what we needed to kind of take that conversation up a level, and for him to really take it seriously and understand that it's something I really wanted and that was important. So I'm glad that I did push the boundary, but I'm glad I didn't push it further, because that might have sent us off the other way. So kind of knowing, and that's the thing with a boundary rather than a rule, isn't it? Where it was, I knew if it, I guess I probably did know that it wasn't that okay, or I probably would have gone further. So I did know, like, I'll probably get away with a kiss. So let's go with that. And it did. It was, it wasn't okay, but it did force us into having the conversations and kind of taking it a step further and really making it serious.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Like, I see that night playing out, and like, I think probably now, and maybe this is the question, is like, looking back on that now, like, how would you approach that night differently? Because it sounds like there was no communication really. Like, I'm going to go to bed, and you're like, okay, I'm now hanging out with this guy and potentially some other friends that he randomly invited back to our house, even though he didn't know them. And now he's off, and like, that's a really interesting, like, the situations we find ourselves in sometimes. I don't know that we know how to navigate them.
Yeah, and I think we kind of look back on these situations and we see it as a miscommunication rather than kind of anyone purposefully doing anything wrong. And I think in a lot of the conversations, there's been a few times where it's happened where we've both kind of interpreted a conversation differently. But I think we're quite good at learning from that and not being angry about it, just understanding the other person's point of view. So it's really helped, like everyone says, our communication is just amazing now. Because we're not scared to say, like, once you've said, I'd like to have sex with other people, you kind of, and then you start talking about fantasies and things, it becomes just communication, nothing scary anymore. You can kind of say what you mean and check that they've understood it. And I'll ask him to repeat things back to me and kind of like, can you confirm what we've just agreed to, and make sure that we're both on the same page?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's huge, right? To be like, oh, I'm interested in having sex with other people. And then like, what does that mean though? Right? Like there's so many levels to what that means. And then, yeah, like you said, you circle back and you say, so here's what we talked about. What's your takeaway? What's my takeaway? Let's make sure we're actually on the same page. Cause it is so, I mean, not like we don't run into this, mm-hmm. right? Where you find out like a week later, you both are on totally different mm-hmm. paths from the same conversation. And you're like, how did this even happen?
Yeah. Or even just after that conversation, once you've had a bit of time to reflect, you might think slightly differently. So kind of, even if something's been agreed to, just still checking in again, mm-hmm. and, just moods change and situations change. So just constantly checking in with each other.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So I'm just going to take us back to like that, I guess you called it a boundary push mm-hmm. in a way. How did you said you started talking more, but how did that progression go?
So I think it was a lot of me trying to ask to talk about it, and him saying, like, I'm really busy with work at the moment. Can we leave it for a bit? And, I'm not ready to talk about this yet. And then I would try and wait, and I'd get frustrated and impatient waiting for an appropriate time. And just because it wasn't at the forefront of his mind. And so then my argument would be, if it's not the forefront of your mind, it's obviously not bothering you that much, is it? And then we'd have a little argument. But I think, and eventually again, like I would push that boundary where he'd asked me to wait, and I'd say, look, I've been waiting long enough. Like, we need to talk about this. This is an issue for me, and we need to work it out. So, but I think it was about, I know if I have bad timing, like, he is not a morning person. So if I try and have the conversation in the morning, which is when I do my thinking, so that would be the best time for me to talk. But if I try and have the conversation with him in the morning before he's fully up and ready for the day, then I'm just going to get nowhere. So it's really about trying to pick my moment and almost kind of booking in an appointment to talk about it, which mm-hmm. sounds a little bit crazy, I think, but it has worked. And we'd almost book it in like a counselling session, but just not have the counsellor there, because we are good at communicating with each other. We've just got to sit down and make the time to do it.
Yeah. You said it sounds a little crazy. I can see that, but I think it's also a valid strategy to have super, could be very hard, vulnerable conversations, and both being able to be, I guess, prepared for that, and also like in that mindset. So you can set that time aside, be intentional about setting that time aside, because it's so easy just to kick it down the road. But if you set that aside, you can both be prepared. And then say you show up and you're like, hey, I'm feeling really off. I'm not ready for this. Mm-hmm. Okay. But then let's reschedule it and do it. And like, you can't just keep rescheduling it, but I don't know, there's some validity to that strategy. And I think it can be really helpful in a lot of situations.
And the other thing I would do is, if all the thoughts were there in my head, but I knew he wasn't ready to talk, I'd just write it all down, and possibly write it a personal version for myself, and then edit it and do a version for him, almost like a letter for him to read whenever he was ready, and then take his time to respond to. Because that's how I work well, I would encourage him to write down his thoughts and feelings and things. That's not so natural for him. But actually, when he has done it, it's just shown me so much more of what's going on for him. And it's just somehow a little bit easier to get the thoughts flowing, I think.
Yeah, I think I just want to echo what Emma said. Like, I think it's a super valid strategy. And I know some people are like, oh, that sounds so clinical, but like, if you know you're about to have a hard conversation, like, to say like, hey, tomorrow after the kids go to bed at 8:00, I'd love to sit down and talk about these 3 or 4 things. So like, does that work for you, for one? And two, like, then he can come prepared, you can come prepared. And it's like you said, you're not on the way out the door like, well, I got to take the kids here and do this and run to the store. And also, how about that non-monogamy we want to be doing? Yeah. And then like it's like thrown in the middle. And I think being intentional about it is a really good strategy. So I appreciate you sharing.
And
that.
Writing down what you said, like writing things down too, because one of you may be ready and the other one's not. And that's okay. Like writing your thoughts down and then giving them to that person. They can choose when to read it and how to respond.
Yeah. And the same, I can kind of splurge out everything that's in my head and then just go through it and pick out the bits that he actually needs to hear, or the bits that I'm saying, like, this is something I really want and this is what I need from you to kind of make it work, rather than him needing to hear all of my innermost feelings. I'm thinking of Ross and Rachel in that letter. It's like 17 pages, front and back. So I could quite happily do one of those a day, I think, sometimes. So I try and pick out the kind of key points and use them as a bit of a starting point for our conversation. I think I am quite clinical about it, I suppose, but it has worked for us.
No, I love that. And thank you for sharing that. And you made a comment too, when in that 12-year gap, that like you kissed some people and it sounds like maybe he did as well. Was there, and we don't need to necessarily focus on it. I just wanted to like clarify that like it was a little bit of both of you sort of exploring.
Yes, but in different ways. So he would be more, like it'd be a stag do and it was like a dare kind of, just having a laugh. Whereas mine would be like, I'd be actually attracted to the person. I gotcha. So, slightly different.
I gotcha. That makes sense. And I think just to highlight too, like you said, that like he came at this with like, cheating is horrible. We're not ever doing that. But as you've sort of unraveled that, it hasn't been quite as rigid. And I think that's just interesting to note. Yeah. And so how did it progress from you start to have these conversations, scheduling the time to talk about it? You had the kiss, then you had the second kiss, and then how did we move forward?
So nothing more happened with that guy. What happened next? I think I was listening to lots of podcasts, and then I heard about, I think possibly on yours, I heard about #open, the dating app, and so I downloaded it and kind of got on there and said to him, like, why don't you just get on it and just see? And so I met somebody from that, and this was right before lockdown. So yeah, like we had a really good time. I'm still in touch with him, but obviously I haven't, because it's long distance, I haven't seen him again. And then my husband had a date as well, kind of between lockdowns. And then so the date that he went on, she told him about another app, Field. And then I downloaded that like that day, because she had told him about it. And then I've had some great times off of the back of that. And suddenly it kind of, it all exploded in a good way. And so I've met 3 different people off of there and met them all kind of a handful of times. And it's been awesome. But I think I definitely really wanted polyamory, not kind of just sex. I wanted like to have a relationship with someone, and none of them have kind of become that. I still have that with the first guy that I met before but haven't seen again. And I've kind of got a friends with benefits thing going on with a girl at the moment. So it's really nice. I feel in a really nice position now. And I think it's just about knowing that I can be open to opportunities. And so it's nothing, it's not developed like I think he seems pretty certain that he doesn't want more. And right now I'm quite happy with how things are for me. So we're in a really lovely place with it at the moment, just both really happy with how things are, and it's all very settled and wholesome and nice. So it's, I think if that changes and I want to meet someone else, then we'll still be having difficult conversations again, because it's been quite a while since there's been a new person. Just because we've been, I lose track of all the lockdowns and things that we've had, but it'll all be kind of going well again, and then we lock down again, and then it opens up again. But it's all, so no, there's not been a new person for a while. So the 2 people that I kind of have something with, they're quite established now. So that's all very comfortable and nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you had said that he's not interested in more, I think was your phrasing. Was that meaning like your husband's not interested in exploring non-monogamy like on his own, or like he had the one date with the one person, and so it's sort of like you and her, and that's sort of his sort of polysaturation, or he's sort of pulled back?
No, nothing more happened with her. He just had one date. I think he would. So he's still got the apps on his phone. I think he would if he matched with someone kind of really, really perfect. But I think it's a lot harder to find girls than guys, isn't it? So he's not, he's not had anyone that's kind of bowled him over. There was one girl and he was quite excited about her, and then she ended up cancelling before they met. And I think if that had gone anywhere, then I think that he might have gone for that. Like he was chatting to her, like the day he started chatting to her, he got his skateboard out of the cupboard and started skateboarding. So, which is what I've always said, like when you're chatting to someone new, it makes you want to do all this new stuff. Like you want to do all this stuff you said you were going to do forever. Like you start running or whatever it might be. So, and I don't think he ever understood that really. He was like, why don't you want to do that for me? And then he did exactly what I told him. So he met her and started skateboarding and like joined a band and things like that. So really it like made him really up his game. So I think he did understand the kind of NRE thing. Then it gave him that kind of rush of energy and motivation to do new things. So that really helped just for him to have that experience and to understand where I was coming from when I talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that's huge. And I appreciate you sharing that as well. Like it's a real thing. Like it sort of sparks something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. I think it is hard, right? As the existing partner to watch that energy come back.
What's the new relationship energy?
Yeah, but not necessarily because of you.
Right.
And so I think there's a lot of insecurity that can be drawn up there.
Oh yeah, totally. Has there been insecurities for either one of you?
Not really. So I think that's been one of the things that I've asked him is when I give him homework from our conversations. So I asked him to kind of write down like what is it that you're actually scared of? Like what are you worried will happen if you say yes? And I think obviously the automatic thing is I assumed he was worried that we'd end up splitting up. But neither of us have ever worried about that. We're really, we've been together so long. So neither of us were worried about splitting up. I think what came from that was he was worried that he'd be like disgusted and not want to touch me anymore. And so we might split up because he would leave me rather than me meeting someone else and leaving him. And he was worried that like every time he says yes to something, it's just pushing us further down. And it's, what will be the next thing that I ask for? Like, when will it ever be over? Am I going to want to have kids with someone else? Am I going to want them to move in with us? Like, I think it's the fear of the unknown more than anything else.
Yeah. And what's the limit, right? Does it ever end? Like how, because right, your relationship, like you said, was sort of on the relationship escalator. You did the whole thing in 10 years or so. And so I think it's easy, to say like, well, what's it going to be like with somebody else? That if that's your only framework, it's very easy to let that get away from you.
But I saw it as like the next level in a relationship. So it's like we're so happy and love each other so unconditionally that we can go to the next level of sharing that with more people. And I think I'm really affectionate and he's not. And my kids are getting older. They don't want all my cuddles anymore. I'm just like, I've got all this love in me. I want someone to give it to. And I think he actually likes that. He gets quite annoyed with me being overly affectionate all the time. So he's quite glad that I've got someone else to give that to sometimes. And he sees that it benefits him. And I try, again, that's another thing, just trying to get him to, like the gratitude thing of if you say what you're grateful for, it reminds you of it and you think about it more rather than it's so easy to hold on to negative emotions. So it just helps him if I get him to actually say out loud how me being with other people benefits him as well. And because there's loads of ways and, all that NRE stuff that I'm doing, that benefits him too. If I'm healthier and I'm like doing more cooking or cleaning the house because someone's coming over, it's all stuff that he benefits from as well. So just getting him to acknowledge that sometimes helps him.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I was curious though, the evolution of the kid, we'll call it the night at your house where he went to bed, and then the conversation sort of got rekindled. How did those conversations then progress from like, hey, this wasn't okay tonight to be doing what we did or to do what you did, to like, let's start exploring, like, let's get on field, or let's get on #open and see what's out there? Because there's a big gap between there.
Yeah. I don't know, really. I think it was just getting silly. It had been so long of having the conversations, and it was like, I think we just had to take some kind of next step. And, it was just, we're in a small town. Like, I wasn't gonna meet somebody just naturally, or it's very unlikely. So getting on an app was really the only way. And I obviously wasn't going to go on Tinder or anything like that. So it was just necessary to, we couldn't just keep talking forever. We had to do something.
Sure. You had to take some action.
Sure.
Yeah.
But for him to be okay, for him to shift to being okay, like, you're going to go on a date and you'll probably kiss them, and you may want to go further than kissing them. Like, it sounds like the kiss wasn't necessarily the problem. It was the, like, what is this going to look like if we continue, and maybe figuring out what that framework is going to be, or at least what you think it's going to be, because it could change tomorrow, right?
Yeah. I think it was just looking at it one step at a time, because downloading the app and getting on it's one thing. And then, you might never match with anyone, or you might not match with anyone that you like. And so I think we were just looking at it as one step at a time. Something I haven't mentioned either is that throughout this time, my mum was sick, and so this comes up. This is in the Esther Perel talk, isn't it? How often bereavement makes people kind of reassess their life, and they quite often, it can lead to affairs or having these sorts of conversations. And for me, we'd already been having those conversations, and I knew that I already wanted it, but it felt a bit like a get out of jail free card, which is awful, isn't it? But I was like, oh, like, no one, if I did cheat on him now, and he like everyone, he would look like the bad guy because my mum's dying. Like, it was, so in a way it kind of, that helped, because, and I was like, people understand, it's much more kind of palatable, like, oh, my mum's sick, and, oh, she's just having a crazy time, she's having a bit of a breakdown over it. And I think it felt like people would be much more accepting of it. So that kind of helped. It gave me a little bit more confidence maybe to push ahead. But in that, like, I think, so it's easier to sell it as it helped me through a traumatic experience, but actually, it was all going on before, and it genuinely really helped me. It wasn't me having a breakdown. It was just really helpful to have other people supporting me through that time and who understood. And it was really nice to speak to people that, obviously for my husband, he was sad in his own right about it, but for someone else who doesn't know my mum and doesn't know my family and background and all of that, it was really nice to have somebody completely separate to talk to, or to not talk to about it, who didn't know about it. So it really, really helped me through, and not in I just need to go off the rails because this is all going on. It was just, I need some actual support and friendship, but from someone that's not kind of personally involved with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having that person that's removed a little bit can offer either a different perspective or just a reprieve from what's going on.
Yeah, and especially because this was through lockdown, and so I just I wasn't able to see anyone to have a chat with them and just a hug or a walk or anything. I was just stuck in my house all the time. So there was no one else to properly talk to. So having someone who I was having quite in-depth, intimate conversations with outside of my household was just, it got me through.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. And I think, right, to your point though, it wasn't like you use this as an excuse to, like, now I'm going to bring up non-monogamy, or even better, I'm just going to cheat because then it'll be okay because I'm going through this hard thing. And I think there's probably very few people who look at it that calculated and like premeditated, but I think it happens a lot. We've interviewed people on the show who a loved one has passed away, and that's where an infidelity pops up, and then that starts the conversation. But you kind of came at it backwards from that. And I think maybe a healthier approach. So I appreciate you sharing it.
But I wonder how much other people were already thinking about it before, and then the bereavement gives them the excuse and the like, well, we're all going to die anyway, let's just do it. And I just wonder, because in my view, I was just like, well, if people heard about it now, and this is like the first they hear about it, they will just put it down to me being sad about mum, and they'll just like, they won't make a big deal about it, and there won't be like awful rumors and gossip because people will get it. But actually, I know that it was, and I'm really pleased that we were having the conversations for quite a long time before that happened. But from the outside, I just felt like, oh, people will kind of get it and be a bit nicer about it if something did happen. And I don't know how much, because I'm quite open with my friends. I don't know how much some of them do still think it's like that. But, you know, whatever people need to think, that's fine.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes you can't control what other people think.
No.
Yeah. Well, and to your point though, like it wasn't like, oh, this was a one time, like, hey, you know, I'm having this hard week, I'm going to do this. It's been a continuation. And so I think probably at a certain point they start to recognize that, like, oh, this wasn't just because of your mom being sick.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can understand all of that. And
totally.
So how have you seen yourself and your husband like grow through this experience? And it sounds like it's been maybe about 3 years since you really kind of dove into it.
Yeah. So just obviously our communication is so much better now. Our sex is so much better. Like, we're much more open about what we want and trying new things. And I guess I feel more, I think before I never felt like I was as good as him. And I always thought that if we split up, it would be him kind of realizing that and leaving me. And I think he says not, but I think he felt the same. So he had never considered that I might leave him. And so it was only once I started, like, well, it was only once he saw that other people were kind of showing an interest that he was like, oh, I actually really need to make an effort here and not take you for granted. So it just totally improved our relationship because we just looked at it differently. And I realized there were times when I thought that we'd break up, and I was like, oh, I'm actually okay with that. Like, it'd be quite exciting to live on my own for the first time. And it just made me realize it was a choice. Like, I want to be with you. I'm not just with you because it's easy or because of the kids or, you know, it's just what I'm used to. It made me realize that it was a choice and not a default. And then kind of more personally, it's definitely, like, it made me work harder at work because, you know, I wanted to show off to people about my job, or it's made me eat better and exercise more because I wanted to look good for a date. And so it's just all the ways that you might want to be better. It's made me just improve myself, and, you know, just wanting to learn more, or, you know, just wanting to have more interesting conversation for a date and developing hobbies and all that sort of thing. So it's massively improved both our lives, I would say, and our relationship.
Yeah, I love that. It really snaps you out of the complacency. I think it's so easy to fall into that. Like, oh, well, we're just together now. That's what we do. And Emma will be here when I wake up, and I'll be there when she wakes up. And like, to realize that, like, no, like, there's another world out there, and we don't have to be doing this, but we choose it every day, and we choose it very intentionally. And I think that realization,
meaning our
relationship. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think I've realized, just kind of thinking about having this conversation today, it made me really realize that my marriage is actually way more conditional than other relationships, because I need him to be a good dad and to keep his job and like do things around the house. And there are so many more conditions on him. They might not be set. He can do what he likes sexually with anyone. There's no conditions around that, but there are conditions on him in other ways. Whereas other people, it's completely unconditional. Like, they can see whoever they like, whenever they like. It's, you know, they can just live their life and they can waste their money on whatever they want to. It's none of my business. And they can, you know, kind of come and go, and our relationship might ebb and flow without it needing to be some awful breakup. So it's just, even, so this girl, like, she smokes. If my husband smokes, I go mental at him. I hate it. But I don't mind it with her. Like, that's, you know, that's just who she is. So it's, I actually have a much more unconditional relationship with the sort of secondary partners, I suppose you'd call them. But I also think it's made me feel, our marriage feel more unconditional as well, because there is just so much more freedom.
Yeah. That's super interesting. The way you talked about that, I think it's really the first time somebody's kind of talked about it in that way on the show. And I hadn't thought about that like when we thought about it, right? Like you spend time with another partner and it's almost like a vacation. Like you step out, you forget about the bills and the taxes and the kids and the chores and the all the stuff that's going on at home. And you just go and have this fun evening. And then you come back to that. And then that becomes the challenge of how do you keep or bring back that like vacation mode for you and your husband sometimes, right? And that's something that Emma and I have been like really working at. Like, we've got all of these things looming over us and we go and see other people.
Well, because it's the monotony of the day to day.
Yeah, or the stress of it.
Monotony, stress. Yeah, just living life.
Yeah.
Versus going and just, on a date or having fun and having that with that other person for a night is so different than the other relationship that if you're in a nesting relationship where you live together or have kids, and it's just
and it's sometimes hard to find that time to just go and have fun. And you're like, well, you see your partner out, like you went and did this fun thing and that fun thing and this fun thing. You're like, well, when was the last time we went and just played mini golf or whatever, did something stupid and pointless just because it was fun? And we see ourselves doing those things with other people. And then we have to like check it and be like, well, we should do that together as well. So there's a different approach that you kind of came at it with, but I feel like it's very similar and I appreciated that.
Yeah, so we were in lockdown. I think our lockdowns were a bit stricter than yours, so like we weren't meant to leave the house like, at all. So we were doing every Saturday night we'd have a date night. So we'd do like one of us would be in charge of like cooking a nice meal, and we'd both get dressed up, and even the person who wasn't cooking would even like go out the front door and come and knock on the door, so you had to answer the door to them. And like we'd set the kids up with a film and pizza or whatever, and they'd have a sleepover. And every Saturday night we would do something different. So we'd like have a nice meal and then go to the cinema and just go and watch a film in our lounge, or we'd like have a disco or whatever. And it was just we were really making the effort. And then that's kind of slid now that we're back and able to go out in real life and see our friends. That's been we haven't made the same kind of effort to do that anymore, which is a shame. I really miss it, but and we keep saying like, well, we must do that again, and then it just never quite happens.
Maybe you have to be intentional about doing it, not every Saturday, but a little more, still work it in sometimes. But it's hard. I completely agree. Like it's hard because you want to go spend time with other people and want to get out, and it's easy to let that just take the back seat.
Yeah, but I've always been like it with the kids too. I think so I've got two, and I've always been really intentional to make sure that we have one-to-one time with each of them, whether that's just walking to school or like taking them to a film or out for dinner or just for a walk or something, or just reading even, but just to make sure that we have time with them together and time separately, because they're both individual people. And so to make sure that we do that with them, but it goes for the two of us as well.
Yeah. And I wanted to say too, I appreciate the view on the silver linings of the pandemic, because I think we've heard a lot of stories from people that like, we started being close in a way we hadn't been in a very long time. And it sounds like that was true for you and your husband as well. And then it's like, how do we keep it going, or how do we bring it back again? Because the lockdown's over and you're like, oh, we're free. And we just, go right back to the way we used to be. And you're like, damn it, I miss those movie nights and getting dressed up and going to the front door. And so that's interesting. And again, thank you. I've said that a lot. I've found a lot of useful stuff out of this. I appreciate it. I was curious on you said about, you made the comment that like, in terms of like the conditionality of your relationship, like there's a lot more maybe rules or expectations you have. And you said, but as far as like hooking up with other people, he can do whatever he wants there. That's not the problem. How have you two approached like the rules and boundaries and framework for like what you can and can't do with other partners, and maybe tying that into like your comment about your husband's worry that maybe he would find out something that you've done or about you, and then that would turn him off and he wouldn't want to be with you anymore. So like, at what level do you share with each other as well?
Yeah. So this is a bit of difficult because I'm a sharer, so I'm the kind of person that would come and talk about this on a podcast. So it's really hard because I do, like, if something good is happening in my life, I want to tell people about it because I'm excited and I'm happy, and like maybe they can learn something from it that could help them be happier as well. So I have to really rein it in with how much I share because I don't want to upset him. And there was one particular moment where that went wrong, but I'm going to use that as a plug for the book because I put it in the book. So I got home from a night and kind of said what had happened, and then that was so the thing that had happened was kind of all fine and within the agreed rules and things that we'd set before I went, but the telling him was not fine, and that was kind of what sent it over the edge. And we didn't even argue about it, but just we didn't have the lovely reconnection evening that I had hoped for. But that was okay. We had maybe a few days where we were fine. We weren't arguing or anything, but just a bit not perfect. So at first we had, like tons of rules, like everyone does. You can do this and you can do this, or like you have to ask permission before doing this. And I think we're quite clear on the whole. I want it to be you can I trust you to make good kind of healthy, safe decisions and to not purposefully ever hurt me. So we are almost there, but there's still a couple of kind of rules as well that would be, I suppose, sort of deal breakers. But they're very clear. So we know where we are in terms of what we can and can't do. And also, so he doesn't, it's not quite don't ask, don't tell, but he doesn't really want to know any details of what I've been up to. It's more like he needs to know who I'm seeing, what time I'll be back kind of thing, which is more about safety. So if he knows who I'm going to be seeing before it happens, like there's always going to be a small conversation about, what's okay. And because it will, just because we've said something was okay once doesn't mean that it's necessarily okay the next time, depending, we might have stuff going on between us that changes that, or maybe someone else has come into the picture which changes that. So it's just a constant conversation, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then how do you take that conversation and then translate it to the person you're going to see, right? Because perhaps one day you're like, we can do anything and everything, and the next time it's like, hey, we just can kiss tonight. And I don't know if there are those kinds of swings, but that conversation, that can be a little hard, I think, on somebody who's feeling almost like their enjoyment or their freedom is being controlled by some other outside force.
Yeah, so that hasn't happened where it's gone kind of backwards with the same person.
Okay.
That's not come up for us.
Okay. I was just curious because I see that as a challenge for sure, but it sounds like not the case. So
yeah.
You mentioned safety. How do you keep yourself safe in these situations, and what strategies do you and your husband have?
Yeah. So I actually talked about this with a friend, and we're saying how it's so much safer because the person you're going to meet, even if it's like a first date and you're going to their house, they know that you've got someone at home waiting for you and expecting you back at a certain time. So there's already that kind of extra safety element. They know it's not like you've just gone home with a random guy from a club or something. Like they know that someone's waiting for you at home. But I've done quite a lot of outdoor dates because it's been lockdown. So I've done lots of walks and things. So I've used on WhatsApp, you can do the live location tracker. So I've got a couple of friends that I would send that to rather than kind of rubbing it in my husband's face. So he would know roughly where I'm going and when I'll be back, but then I would send them the live tracker so they can, just see if anything seems off. But so far it's all been really safe. And I just think, it's so open. I think there's definitely, if I'm seeing someone else that's in any kind of non-monogamous relationship rather than just someone who's single and monogamous, then like everything's so upfront, isn't it? So you're having all these conversations. Like for example, before meeting someone, I might tell them like, I'm not allowed to have sex on first dates. Like, can you imagine saying that to a single guy that you met on Tinder? Like they'd be like, oh, don't bother then. Or just it's like setting up like you are expecting to on the second date. So it's, but I think it's it's different in this situation because they probably have a rule like that themselves, or they have had at some point, or they've met someone else in that situation. So although it kind of takes some of the fun out of it, I think being that upfront is quite refreshing. It's there's like not so many mind games and things when it's with other people that are non-monogamous, because they just get it and they like, there's just not time for it. Just trying to juggle like 3 relationships here and a family and a work and, I don't have time to mess around. So I like the honesty of it.
Yeah. Well, and especially if you're upfront about it, right? Like if that information comes up, like in the texting that leads up to a date versus like you're making out and getting naked and you're like, oh, by the way, no sex on the first date. Like, like, oh, whoa, like that would have been good to know about 4 hours ago or 3 weeks ago. So I think the honesty is super important, but like you said earlier, timing is everything on those. Yeah.
I had a question a little while ago and then we got on different topics. So I'm going to kind of switch gears here for a minute. When you and your husband kind of started these conversations and navigated these conversations, you ended up starting to date separately. But did you two ever talk about, more traditional swinging, doing things together, dating people together? I'm just kind of curious if that came up in your conversations.
It did, but I don't think it's anything that really interested either of us. We went to see a counselor and she suggested going to like a sex club to help normalize sex for him a little bit. And he was surprisingly keen on doing that, which I hadn't expected. And I was kind of willing, but not really into it. And then the pandemic hit anyway, so it kind of didn't come up. But no, it just doesn't really appeal. I think for me, there's so much more to it than sex. Like I love all the getting to know someone and all of that. I wouldn't want to do it without all of that. All that kind of nice conversation and all the anticipation and the uncertainty and all of that. So it's not kind of happened for us so far, but not to say that it wouldn't.
Yeah, but it's just not an interest right now. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of along the same lines of like, how have you seen yourself grow? I think maybe like you kind of came into this a few years ago. You did a ton of reading. You did a ton of research. Like, what are some of the things that you've learned or have like changed in your approach to relationships or love and sex as you've been exploring this? I know this is similar to like how you've grown, but I think there's a little bit of a twist on it there.
Yeah. So I think it's just seeing that a relationship doesn't have to be kind of moving forward. It can just be where it is, and it can be quite casual, but still committed and still really happy and enjoyable. And it doesn't need to be leading to moving in or getting engaged or having kids or anything like that. You can just enjoy it for what it is. And the pandemic did that as well. Just made me just enjoy the day that I'm in, which is something I've always struggled with my whole life. Like I would, even as a kid, my mum would always say I'd like finish one birthday party and tell her what I wanted to do the following year. I was always looking ahead and excited about the next thing and not really living in the moment. And I think the last couple of years, I've really learned to live in the moment and just enjoy the journey in a way that I've not always been good at.
Yeah. No, I think that's super important. And maybe to build on that, you talked about earlier that like you were kind of maybe looking for something that was a little more of a relationship, and you haven't really found that. You've had like some friends with benefits and a couple of repeat experiences with a few different people. But like, what is your, like, if you got like a magic wand, not the sex toy magic wand, like an actual magical wand, not that one doesn't work magic on occasions, that you could like create your ideal like relationship structure, like, what would that look like for you? Like number of people and what those people would look like?
It's a hard question.
I know, but you got a magic wand. You got to use it.
So I'm not far from that. So I think I've always had, as well as my husband, I've always had a really close best friend, but they kind of come and go. And I just want that, but with sex as well, even if it's occasional. So I've basically got that with this friend at the moment. Like she hangs out with all of us. She is friends with the kids, and we all get on really well. But there's just no like title on it, and it's not. So and what I really like as well, it's not sex every time. It's, you know, we are friends. We'll just go out and have a really nice day out, and you know, that's it. It's not like hand holding and kissing, and but then the next time there might be, and I quite like the uncertainty of that as well, because I've got certainty already. Like, I don't need to know what's going to happen every time. I like that I never know, and like she might be seeing someone else at the time who's monogamous, or she might not be, and I like how that kind of changes over time. So yeah, like I'm pretty much got what I want. I think on the whole. What I'd like the most is a spare bedroom in my house. That's what I'm missing.
with soundproof walls and a lock on the door.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yep. We know that spare room.
Yeah.
Been designing it for years.
A little while ago, you mentioned too that you had a story that you weaved into your book around kind of telling somebody, and I want to come back to that. But before we do, I wanted to ask you, like, how open in your life are you about your non-monogamous journey with other people?
Yeah, more open than my husband would like. So
hence the podcast.
So I think for me, it's a real test of a friendship if I feel comfortable and safe talking to somebody about it. And so I like putting that to the test and talking to lots of people. And I made a real effort, particularly right at the beginning, to talk to people who I knew had been on either side of an affair, or who I knew like definitely wouldn't like it, just to kind of see, like, I know this person really isn't going to like this thing, but they love me. So like, what are they going to make of this? Are they going to understand? How are they going to react? And like, is there anything they could say that would make me change my mind? And so I've purposefully kind of chose to speak to certain people, and then, you know, get like one drink in me and I'll tell anyone. Like I am quite open, but also, you know, like not entirely, not everybody in our lives knows. But I would like to be more open, because I think if people have heard bits of rumors and gossip, they're probably imagining something way sort of worse than what's actually going on. I think, like, if you just tell them the truth, it's basically boring, isn't it? Like, it's not that exciting. So truth is the best kind of antidote to rumors. But yeah, my husband's not quite there with that level of openness just yet. Not with everyone. So he knows like a lot of people know. But it's, you know, I think, and when I tell people, it's nice, like mostly they say something along the lines of, oh, I wish I could do that, but like I couldn't let my partner do it, so like no way. And then they just want to check that my husband's okay. Like that's the main thing. Like, I haven't found people to be judgmental or difficult about it at all. Like, people have been really supportive and seem genuinely interested and want to know about it. And most people have got some kind of a story, haven't they, of like, oh, like, yeah, there's this one time. So yeah, it kind of, and I think, yeah, and it really has built my friendships with people. Like, I feel a lot closer to the people that know. And I think sometimes as well, if maybe it's a friend who I felt close to, and I can sort of sense they want to like check in on me about my mom and like ask how I'm doing, but maybe I don't want to talk about it. If I talk about that instead, then it like builds the vulnerability, and so they're like, oh, well, she does trust me. It's not that she doesn't want to talk to me. So that's been quite nice as well. So it's really, yeah, as well as making my relationship better, it's made loads of my friendships so much stronger.
Yeah. Just to confirm, your husband does know you're on this podcast.
He knows.
You're on it,
yeah.
right?
He knows. He's taken the kids out, especially for the afternoon. So yeah, he knows I'm here.
Okay, just wanted to verify that for the listeners.
We should have done that at the front end.
I know.
You know what? We're not perfect. I think the other question I had, and it's probably a yes or no question, so it's not going to spark a ton of conversation, but like in your time telling friends, you said like, I've told friends and they're like, oh, I wish I could do that, or I'd be interested in doing that. Have you ever told like both halves of a couple, like individually, and had them both be like, I'd really be interested in that. And then you talk to the other one and like, I'd really be interested in that. And you're like, we should probably talk to each other about this.
No. But like, I kind of want that to happen. That'd be really interesting.
I would think you should work on that.
No, actually, no. Now that I think about it a bit more, that has actually, like, so I have told two halves of a couple, and they have both said exactly that line. Like, I'd really like to do it, but I wouldn't want the other person to do it. And I have been like, well, you should talk about that. Like, why don't you just talk about it? Like, you both clearly like the idea and aren't repulsed by it. But no, as far as I know, they haven't followed that up.
We need to get them on the show, and we need to facilitate this conversation live and pick apart what are you concerned about? What are your fears?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's hard, right? Because if the answer was like, I would love to do that, but I don't think my partner would, that's different, right? Then you could be like, well, you talk to your partner because they might be interested. But if it's like, I don't think I could handle it, then I see that being the limiting. And that
but most really people think that, right?
Anyway.
Most people think they wouldn't be able to handle it.
Yeah.
Although I don't know, like I didn't. Maybe it's really hard to know, are people just wired this way, or is it that you've just had the time to think about it? Because I never felt like it would bother me for him to be with someone else. Like, it was just, if you're going to leave me, I need to know about it, but otherwise I don't really care. Like, go and do your thing. I'm sure, I always felt confident it would only do good things for our relationship, even before I'd done any reading on it. But yeah, I think most people don't think like that, right?
And so on that though, like, do you think that's tied to the security you have with him? And maybe the sort of the question on top of that is, when you've been in sort of these more casual relationships with other people, has jealousy cropped up for you in those? Like, this person, maybe you've seen them 3 or 4 times and they're like, oh, I'm going out with someone else. And you're like, hey, where did that come from? Like, I don't even feel that with my husband, but now with this person I've seen 3 times, I'm feeling something.
Yeah. So I think I have definitely felt that, but it's been more of that fear of, what if they're going to make them be monogamous and then they can't see me anymore? It's not like it doesn't bother me that they're with someone else. Like, I'm full of compassion. Like, just go for it, enjoy it. Like, I'm mainly just really happy for them. But it is the like, what if they want to be monogamous with them? Like, how will that go? And if I don't feel secure enough in the relationship I have with them, like, that's where it comes in, that kind of fear and uncertainty. Whereas, yeah, like you say, it's so stable with my marriage that doesn't come into it at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that, because it's interesting to see how that lack of jealousy in one area can come up in a different, and we've seen that and experienced that. So it's jealousy is an interesting emotion to pick apart. But wow.
I want to hear, so you said you had a story that we talked about in your book.
I think she was going to try to force us to get to the
you've
book.
got to read the book.
I think that was the whole point. It was
sure. Then can you talk about your book?
She's just teasing us with it.
That's what I want you to do. Tease the rest of the book.
So it was, like I said earlier, it was really about just trying to write the book that I wish had existed, and that I felt like the kind of more reluctant partner could read and be like, oh, actually, like, this isn't what I thought at all. And also that you could maybe share with friends. So if you've told a friend that you're non-monogamous, and they're like, what does that really mean? And they can read it. And I had a friend who I'd told and talked to quite a lot about it in the past, and then she read it for me and she was like, oh, I totally get it now. So just for, if you want someone to read it and be like, oh, actually it's quite like wholesome and nice, really, isn't it? It's not all like dungeons and sex parties, and it's actually like proper relationships, and there's feelings there and support, and I've included a lot in the book about all of the other the sort of NRE stuff that just helps you grow in other ways. So I've tried to make it a very wholesome, good story, kind of showing all of the stuff it's about the journey, not the destination. And it's purposefully, hopefully, quite a short, easy read, so that anyone could pick it up and read it and kind of just get a little bit of insight into what it might actually be like, which is probably quite different than what people have in their heads. I know we're going for, my husband and I are going for a weekend away for his birthday, and someone asked us the other day, we're like, oh, like, where are you staying? Like, obviously thinking we were staying somewhere like some kind of, I don't know what, but I was like, a B&B? Like, what do you, like, what? So I think people, as soon as they hear it, they have a lot of assumptions. So the book is to kind of show people that it's like, there might be some of that, but that's not actually what it's all about. Like, there's a whole lot more, just lots of conversations and getting to know each other's partners and things like that a little bit, and how that can feel. So hopefully I've tried to make it very wholesome, but still with quite a lot of dirty sex in it as well, which I think that's the reality. Like, I think a lot of books, it's one way or the other, isn't it? And that's not like the reality. Most people have got both elements in their life. So I've tried to show that in the book.
Yeah, it's exciting. And the sequel will be all sex parties and dungeons, right?
Absolutely.
That's when okay. Yeah. Just wanted to make sure that we were going to give a little something for
Yeah.
Exactly. You gotta start here and work up to that part. So what is the name of the book, and when can people find it, and where can they find it?
It's called Into the Open by CJ Alexander, and it's available on Amazon now.
Awesome. Well, we will have links in the show notes for that.
Yes.
And we're excited to check it out ourselves and get more people reading that. Like, yeah, it doesn't have to be, and again, nothing wrong with sex parties and dungeons, but it doesn't have to go that extreme if you don't want it to. And yeah. And so thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you wanted to share?
I don't think so. I think we've covered quite a lot there.
Perfect.
We have.
We covered a lot of ground. So thank you again, CJ, for coming on, for sharing everything with us, for writing the book and doing the work you do, and extend our gratitude to your husband. Perhaps he's listening. So thank you, husband of CJ,
yes,
for your openness and letting the story get out there. So thank you, and
enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you very much.
And we're back. A huge thank you to CJ for coming on the show, for sharing your story, and for the book that you wrote too. We're excited to get all of this information out there, and go check out her book. Links are in the show notes. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, CJ, and we're excited to get it out there. Again, just a quick reminder, we are going to be in Los Angeles tomorrow, Thursday, April 7th, with Sex Positive LA at a movie screening,
yes.
Netflix screening. So that's going to be super exciting. Again, links to sign up for that are in the show notes. And we have upcoming virtual events at the end of April on the 22nd and 23rd. And everybody is welcome to those. I mean, everybody's welcome to the Sex Positive LA event. You just got to be in LA.
Right.
So you can be anywhere to do the virtual events.
Yes.
Even
exactly.
LA.
Even LA. You can be anywhere. Information to sign up for all those events are available on our website, including you can also find out more information about our Patreon community. Our website is normalizingnonmonogamy.com, and all of that information is there. Also on our website, as you're getting out and meeting new people, we highly encourage you to also get tested for STIs. And our favorite way to do that is to use STDcheck.com. If you use the links on our website, you get $10 off your panel, and it is an amazing way to do this. It's quick and efficient and discreet. We couldn't recommend it more.
Yeah, it's the service Emma and I use, and with the discount, it's about $130 for a 10-panel test, and using the links helps support the show financially, and so we are eternally grateful to you for not only getting tested and knowing your status, but for helping support the show financially by doing something you were already going to do.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
All right.
I think that's it.
Well, but next week we've got another interview.
We do.
People were like, oh man, I hope we get more.
Surprise, surprise. Next Wednesday, we have an interview with Anna. Come back and listen. It's an amazing conversation.
Yeah, love this one. We're super excited for it. We will see everybody in 7 days. Unless we see you tomorrow, then we will see you in 1 day.
Right.
All
exactly.
right.
Good job.
I thought so.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.